Matthew, one of the things that I don't like about the wintertime the most is like all of the fresh fruits and vegetables that you get during the summer that people are like growing in gardens, farmers markets, like downtown Winston, all summer long, and Clemens, like all kind of different farmers markets that
You ever been to the one in Greensboro, the farmers market in Greensboro?
No,
I've
seen
heard
it off the side of the road.
I've heard amazing things about it. That it's just a massive supply and all sorts of things that you could ever think and know about or want is there, but I've never been.
The only thing that I've ever heard about that place is there's a person in there that does homemade donuts, which I feel like is the opposite of why you should be going to the fresh market.
Yeah, you would think of like
market or
vegetables
or
and they're
whatever
like,
it's called.
here's fried dough.
Yeah.
But
yeah, let's go get some fresh grown tomatoes, but then leave with just donuts.
I mean, that would be something that I would do.
I like it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've tried to plant stuff before, and it's a hassle. I'm not very good at it. I can plant one tomato bush and all season I'll get like 2 tomatoes off of it. And so kind of the juice is not worth the squeeze. You ever like grown anything? You ever had a garden?
I mean, not me personally. My dad did a lot of that when we were growing up. He was the one that would, he knew all about it, and he was a grown man, so he would push the tiller and things like that. But as kids, we
live in the 1800s. What is he pushing a tiller for?
Well, I mean, he's not going to have a horse do it. I mean, that would be 1800s. He's got
like a
motorized, like a gas powered.
Oh, okay. When you said pushing, I was like, is he What?
Well, yeah. I mean, you stand behind it and push it. You don't. It's not like an AI robot. Right. It's not a Roomba for your garden or something like that. Like I mean, you still got to exert some energy and some effort. But we would go out there and do stuff in the garden as kids. Like I can't take credit for growing anything really, but we would go, especially while he was gone at work. We'd go out there and pick the cucumbers and the green beans and the squash and the whatever.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
My problem, what happens to me is I decide early on in the spring, I'm not going to plant a garden. I'm not going to mess with it. It's too much effort, too much money, too much problem. Well, in June and July, when everyone is eating their fresh vegetables and picking it and it's all coming into harvest, I'm like, oh, wait, no, I want some fresh tomatoes. Like, man, I don't want to buy my squash from Walmart anymore. But at that point, like it's too late. Like you have to, in order to harvest in June, you have to plant seeds early on. The reading that we're talking about today is actually a story that's told in the Old Testament, but it's referenced in the New Testament in James. Those types of things always intrigue me. Like when it's said one place and then it's referred to again, for me, it's almost like a little alarm. It's just like, hey, everything in the Bible is important, but second time we're mentioning this, pay attention. This is going to be on the test. And so James, as he's talking about prayer, quotes a man and a prayer and a figure from 1 Kings, a guy named Elijah. And a crazy story. If you've never heard it, you got to look up the text, not just read that it's in 1 Kings, but like look up 1 Kings 17 and 18, this story and how it unfolds. And think about, there's a man, James says, that prayed, and he prayed that it would not rain. And God answered his prayer, and it did not rain until Elijah prayed again that God would open up the heavens. It was like,
what, 3 years, 3.5 years?
3.5
something
years.
Like that? That's a heck of a drought.
It did not
That's a heck of a drought.
But James mentions something that is not told in the original text, that once the rains came, then seeds began to sprout from the ground. Things began to grow up again for the first time in 3.5 years. That's a little detail that you might read and look at and be just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what happens. It rains and things grow. But it only grows after it rains if you put the seed in the ground.
That's
like
true.
You can't be like me in the middle of July and be like, wish I had some tomatoes. And you're just like, yeah, well, you didn't plant in April and in May. And so if you didn't plant in May, you're not going to have tomatoes in June and July. And it just struck me that there's time in our waiting where God is allowing us to continue to plant seeds in our lives. The things that you are planting, the seeds that you are planting, the seeds that you're sowing in the ground now is going to determine the harvest that you have later. And I think sometimes during the waiting, we don't want to plant. Like nothing's happening. The ground is dry. There's no use. We don't know when the rain's going to come.
I mean, we're waiting, and so we feel like we're stuck.
Yeah.
And there's nothing going on, so it's unimportant.
Yeah. We don't know when we're going to have a harvest, and so that can discourage us from planting seeds. But this reminder from the Old Testament and the New Testament, quoted again by James, is that during the waiting, we got to be faithful to continue to plant, faithful to sow seeds, because what you and I are doing today in this season of waiting is going to determine the harvest that we have in the next season. Please don't get to the next season and realize there is going to be no harvest spiritually in your life because you did not sow the seed in the previous season. Even when the ground is dry, even when it doesn't look like there's no rain, even when you've been praying and praying and praying and praying and it seems like no answer. Man, Matthew, please continue to be faithful to plant the seeds.
Yeah.
Do the work now so that we can see the harvest later.
I think one of the really difficult questions this brings up is, and you got to be honest with yourself, right? We can sugarcoat things when we're thinking about ourselves, and we don't want to really be honest about what's going on in our lives and whether we're being faithful in the moment and all those sorts of things. You got to be honest with yourself when you ask this question, but asking yourself, if God gave me what I was asking for, would it truly help me, or is it more likely that that thing would hurt me because I'm not ready for it yet? Am I prepared for what it is that I'm asking God to do in my life? Are you ready for what you're asking God to give you? In James 5, when he's talking about this, it's a great little, even emphasizing that point you made about planting the seeds, and even during the middle of a drought, is James talks about two different rains, the early rains and the late rains. And, then they're planting mostly things like grain and wheat. And in the early rains, that's what helps the seed take root in the soil and sprout. But you can't just go then, but you have to wait for the late rains, because it's the late rains that strengthen the stalk, so that when the grain heads bud, the stalk doesn't break and crumble underneath the weight of the ready to harvest grain. And then therefore it's in the dirt and eaten by birds and whatnot, and you can't use it anymore. And so you have to have a strong enough base, strong enough stalk, but you got to wait for the late rain. So in that waiting for the late rains, the farmer knows, like, this wheat isn't going to produce anything if the stalk isn't strong enough. And so I wonder if sometimes God's making us wait because we are not actually ready for what it is that we want, for what it is that we're asking for. And that's tough. I mean, that's it's a hard question to be honest with yourself about, because you have to look at your own deficiencies and say, shoot, well, maybe the reason I don't have that job, or I don't have a spouse, or I don't have a child yet, is because God says you're not ready. If I gave that to you, it'd break you. It would hurt you more than it would help you. And so I need to be focused on getting spiritually, mentally, maybe even there's some habits you need to create physically ready. I need to get all these things ready so that I'm prepared for God to give me what it is that I'm asking for him to give me, right? I mean, we do this in our culture. It's not like this is some mind-blowing, groundbreaking stuff that we're talking about. Like, almost always, not in every situation, but almost always, you go to school and you get the education and you're trained before you get the job, because you can't get the job without the training. And maybe, in our life, the things that we're praying for, God's like, man, you got to get prepared for this. You got to be trained for this. You're not strong enough to handle this yet. I think about, like, right now, as a newlywed, my wife and I are like, great, I can't wait to have some kids. Like, they are blessings from the Lord. They're not easy, but we want them. And so at the same time, we have to be thinking about, well, like we said, they ain't easy by any stretch of the imagination. A kid, just one, will challenge you, much less multiple. And so are we ready? How are we preparing ourselves now with habits, with the things that we're doing in the mornings and the evenings, with our time management, all the things, with our money? Like, how are we saving? Because kids are expensive. Everybody knows that. Like, so how are we preparing now to be ready for what we want in the future? I mean, it's a tough question, but I think it's exactly what James and Elijah, this whole story, is bringing up.
And if you'd have told me 10 minutes ago when we started this that you were going to give me a lecture on late and early rains and the strength of the stalk versus the size of the grain
head, what's funny about
like that? What world are we living in? Who are you, Matthew? Who are you?
I didn't even write that down. That's from when we preached on James a while back, and I don't even think I used that.
Are you reading
the
Farmer's Almanac before you go to bed?
The first century Farmer's Almanac from back in 33 AD, like back. No. I mean, that's the Lord preparation. There you go. You want to talk about preparation? That's sermon preparation from months ago. Right
I don't
there.
know what just happened. Let me pose this question to you.
Yeah, please rescue this. Everybody's
what are you doing to prepare now for what God has for you next? The preparation, the sowing that we do today during the time of waiting is going to determine the harvest that we see tomorrow. So please don't waste the time of waiting. Be faithful. Continue to plant seeds. Continue to pray prayers of great faith. Continue to walk forward in obedience and recognizing what God has for you in the next season is going to be connected to the seeds that you're planting in this season. So today, let's keep planting.